I'm here today with Mike Merchant, Senior Consultant at Arbinger Institute. Mike recently gave a presentation about strategic flexibility in a time of crisis. And during that presentation, we had thousands and thousands of questions come in. And while we couldn't fit them all into that time, we wanted to take a minute to address a few more of those questions today. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to start right in with our first question from Michael, who said, many teams have switched to working remotely literally overnight. What is the most important thing for team leaders right now?
What comes to mind right off is just that they ought to be connecting. So if we're going to new technology and we're now connecting with each other, we're having meetings together, we're having conversations together remotely, let's just get on the phone, or get on Zoom, or get on GoToMeeting or FaceTime, whatever we're using right now, and let's actually have a conversation. So just start off by having a meeting, getting a team together, practicing, working through the bugs to where it gets really comfortable with us. So I think for a leader, let's get people working through it right now, working through the bugs so the conversations are easy, the technology is easy. We can actually start having those conversations. And I think people will be surprised, especially with today's technology, how suddenly we'll feel like we're in the same room and we'll feel like we're actually having these conversations. And so with Anasazi Foundation, which is an organization that I get to be part of, I'm chairman of the board there, we actually just set up all of our regularly scheduled meetings right away, virtually. And we tried to keep with that cadence as people were moving through that. We've actually set up some reporting meetings with a more frequent cadence based on the current circumstances. But our regular everyday meetings we're doing right now virtually. So get people talking to each other right away.
As a follow-on to that question, teams are needing to communicate side to side, up and down, in and out of their organization. There are so many different stakeholders here. How do you recommend addressing that at not just at a leadership level, but throughout the organization?
No, that's a great question. And so I really think you have to rethink how you communicate right now. And you may want to set up things in a different way. For example, you may have someone report to a team rather than to an individual. You might set up different reporting systems. You might have people connecting with each other regularly. So rethinking how you communicate, how people connect, how they work through problems together, who's in what meeting. It's a great time to make adjustments to that, because it can get pretty confusing when you've got 3 or 4 meetings going on at a time and people aren't talking to each other. One of the great things I love about the Arbinger work, the Outward Mindset work, is we actually really make an intentional effort to think about how we impact each other, how we report to each other. So this is an opportunity, it's really an opportunity to actually put cadences and structures in place that get us doing that right now, right? So to come to it with an outward mindset, making sure we're alive to how we impact each other, making sure we're accounting for how we're impacting each other and finding ways to be helpful. Believe it or not, we can actually use this as an opportunity to not have silos, to get people actually working laterally and in ways. I'll never forget Terry Warner, the founder of Arbinger. He once said, he says, there really are no silos. We're always either helping or hindering each other in some way. And so I think the more we can connect people, the more we can think through those structures and be thoughtful about that, the better. And here's an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I like that idea of seeing this not so much as a negative disruption to the way we communicate, but a disruption in the purest sense, which is an opportunity to change the way we've always done things and see them in a way that can be more productive and ultimately actually better than it was before, maybe just bumping into each other in the hallway, but rather being really intentional with our communication. So I have another question here from Frederick, who says, how does someone in a manager role direct organizational efforts toward those regular check-ins?
Yeah, and again, I think as a leader, you have to set the tone for that. You have to be the first one that's actually doing that. So regularly checking in with your team. Again, applying the outward mindset pattern. Get curious about how what they're experiencing as a result of COVID-19 and have them think about the challenges they're facing right now. The more you're asking those questions, and the greater opportunity you'll have to invite them to do that with those who report to them. And so you as a leader set the tone, think about the frequency of check-in, And with everything changing daily, we all have to increase the frequency of check-in. And those don't have to be long. They can be simple. For example, at Anasazi, we just set up a regular everyday meeting. We get together with the leadership team, touch base with them. I'm doing that with them. They're doing it with their people in the same way. We still have our regular structured meetings, but those regular check-ins really make a difference. There's a phrase I like to use in our DIOM training, developing and implementing outward mindset training, and that is the more connection, the less correction. And so the more we're connecting, the less corrections we're going to have to make. And those don't have to be long, they don't have to be formal. But the more I get a sense about how I impact you, how I can be more helpful to you, and at what frequency should I be checking in with you, and they're doing that with me, the less correction we'll have to make as a leader. So set the tone as a leader.
That kind of brings me to another question that we had from one of our listeners today, one of our participants in the webinar, who actually, to be fair, this came up in a number of different ways. A lot of questions around this idea of managing up. And that's something Arbinger talks about a lot, is the up and down. So how does an employee help facilitate that, and explain a bit more about how managing up might be applicable in today's tumultuous times?
I actually love that question. I'm grateful you asked that question, or whoever posted that, because I think we often think that because we're in a power differential or a hierarchical situation that we have very little influence going up, or that maybe we shouldn't say things. But as a leader, leaders don't always see. And they don't always see all of the aspects of the business, how customers are being impacted, how employees are being impacted by decisions. Leaders need that information to be able to lead and to move forward. They need to be aware and alive. And the only way they can do that is by having a relationship with those who report to them. And you think about anybody who's been a leader on this, who's watching this, you think about all of us as leaders, we've had people who have influenced us, who report to us, who have influenced us as a leader. And they've influenced us as a leader because they have worked the lower levels of the pyramid, right? They actually see us as a person. They build relationships with us. In other words, increase the frequency of connection with us. They actually listen and learn from us and our vision and where things are going. And by so doing, it feels simple and easy for us. It's almost as if they've earned the space to be able to tell me, Mike, what you're doing right now is not helpful. Or Mike, we need to make a course correction. Or Mike, this is something you don't see that we do that will hopefully inform the decisions you're making right now. And so if I'm in a situation where I want to influence my leader, the influence pyramid works upward just as well as it does towards those I report, towards a customer, towards a coworker. It works upward as well. So work those lower levels of the pyramid to improve my influence with my leader. I think in addition, simple tool, SAM, I want to be really alive to my leader. And so how are they doing? How's this impacting them? How can I be more helpful to them? At what frequency would you like me to be checking in as a leader? And then I think regularly holding ourselves accountable so that they don't have to do that for us. The more I can think about what information can I get them so they don't have to hunt me down and find it, that will be helpful to them in moving things forward. And so I just, as a leader, make it easy for your leader to connect with you and report up. Again, increases frequency of connection, increases my influence with that leader to move forward. We may not always agree with the decisions they're making. Always be aware as well that we may not see what they see as well. So again, listening, learning, what do they see? How can we be most helpful? How do I hold myself accountable? What frequency should I be checking in with you?
Okay, Mike, I have one more, maybe slightly large question for you. I know you coach with a lot of organizations. You've worked with government and nonprofit and corporate. You've worked really everywhere and in coaching and executive and all of the above kind of roles. And I know that you have a lot of people talking to you right now, kind of talking through this crisis and wanting to know, especially as leaders, how should they be approaching this? What's the first thing they can do? So if you can, I want you to think of what is the single most important or biggest piece of advice you either have been giving or that you think you think is the most important takeaway for leaders who may be listening to this conversation right now? What can they walk away with and say, I'm going to start doing this right away?
We can't, as leaders, we can't lose the long-term perspective in a right now moment. I think everyone's looking for someone to hold on to, someone who has actually got vision, somebody who has confidence in the future and that we're going to actually get through this. We'll get through this. This is a storm and it's hard. We got to get through this. That doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to the right now moment. It's just, as a leader, we've got to be confident. We've got to stay forward. We can't be doomsdayer and all of that. And that doesn't mean we don't work contingency plans. It doesn't mean that we don't plan for, what we need to do in this case, if this happened or that happened, and engage teams in that process and be thinking critically and to make decisive and right now decisions that are critical to the business's future. But I don't think we should lose that long term, that perspective out over time. People need that. Even though that target might change a bit every day with where we're moving, they need to feel like, look, I'm looking out to when this is going to end, and we're going to make adjustments right now, but we will get through this. They need to know that from you as a leader.
Thank you, Mike. This has been a fascinating conversation for me, and I think really helpful, particularly in going back and answering some of those most pressing questions people had during your presentation. So thank you so much, Mike Merchant, Senior Consultant for Arbinger Institute. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you today.
Thank you.